Hello and welcome to the first in what will be a series of marathon swim story deep dives into the human side of the superhuman feats of endurance swimmers and those who support them. I'm marathon swimmer and coach Shannon Keegan. On August 22nd, 2019, Stephen Rouch set off from the East Side Restaurant in Newport, Vermont, and swam not just the 25 miles across the Canadian border to the northernmost tip of Lake Memphremagog, but after exiting the water on the beach in Magog, Quebec, he quickly got back in to start the return journey, arriving back at his departure spot more than 25 hours from whence he left, becoming the first male to complete the task in the fastest recorded time. Enjoy this retelling of Stephen's epic swim from the perspective of himself and his crew, Christopher Graefe, Ann Rennick, Mary Stella, Jimmy Woo, and Stephen Rouch's father, Stephen Rouch Sr. Enjoy. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our first and hopefully a long series of Marathon Swim Stories deep dives, where in this case, we're going to retell Stephen. I'm going to get your last name wrong. How do I pronounce it?
Rao rhymes with cow.
Perfect. Stephen Rouch's 50-mile double Lake Memphremagog crossing, and we've got his whole crew today. And to kind of kick things off, I want everyone to introduce yourself as well as your role on the team. We'll start with you, Stephen.
I'm Stephen. I did the 50-mile swim, I started swimming when I was 7, and been swimming ever since, other than about a 11, 12-year hiatus after college.
Yeah, I'll have to have you back to get your story. Today we just talk about this swim. Who should go next? Mary, you're next in my grid. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mary. I did the observing and filled out the official log, and pretty much crewing wise, I was mostly Stephen's handler. I'll put it that way.
Every swimmer needs a handler. That's great. Let's see, Ann, what about you?
Hi, I'm Ann, and I would say I was like miscellaneous. But I helped with pictures, stroke counting, which was a lot, helping Mary and Chris, because the three of us were on the boat together, and then also help prepare feeds and throw the bottles and all that good stuff, and stay in the cone of vision was very important.
The cone of vision. I can't wait to hear more about that. Okay, we'll keep going through introductions. Christopher.
Hi, Chris. I was sort of the crew chief on the operation, as well as kind of a pilot of one of the 2 pontoon boats we had out there. So we were doing a lot of organization beforehand and working with Phil, obviously, on the organization of timing and just scheduling and all that. So kind of helping manage a lot of moving parts. But I think as we all came together and having had the experience of actually having done marathon swims before and even crewed marathon swims before, everybody just worked so well together. It's hard to, I don't even like to think of myself as the chief. I think everybody took leadership roles at different points because they had to, which was super fun and really just great testament to this group.
That's awesome. I can't wait to get into this. It's so exciting. I'm like on the edge of my seat. Jimmy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jimmy Woo, and I was a kayaker for Steve's swim.
Okay, we'll get more into what that really means as we talk about swimming for 25 hours. Okay, Steve, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Steve. I'm Steve's dad, and I was one of the kayakers, and really he told us the kayakers were to do nothing but to kayak. So I wasn't allowed to touch a camera or do anything. So
oh my goodness.
We kayaked and fed him, and that was it.
All right. So before we get into kind of how things played out, I want to understand, Stephen, why the heck did you want to sign up for this 50-mile swim?
You got to keep challenging yourself in this sport. I think a lot of us do it because we want to see what we can do. And honestly, I had done the Kingdom Week the week before, the year before. I did the double at Massawippi, which was an 18-mile swim, and I finished it and I felt pretty fresh. And honestly, it was like, well, want to make sure that the next challenge I do is one that actually challenges me, and not just a little more exhaustion after the end of a 25-mile swim versus 18 miles.
Yeah. Oh, and how did you pick your lovely crew here?
Well, obviously all these people are close to me. My father, of course, he's been with me since the very beginning of my open water career. Mary and I have been dating for a couple of years, so she was a no-brainer, and she's probably has the most experience with long distance open water swimming of the group. She certainly had the longest swim before my 25-hour swim of this group. Jamie Ann and I, we've crewed for each other. I had the opportunity to crew for her for both Scar and her Catalina swim. I believe they were both in 2019, or maybe one was Catalina and Scar was 18. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Christopher, we were competitors when we first met, but we've come to be friends, and he's just an excellent person. I mean, he led this thing, and he kept everybody in line with the whip and whatnot. And then Jimmy is he's married to my cousin, and they both live in New Hampshire, about 90 minutes from Phil and Lake Memphremagog, and he and his family have been supporters of me in all the swims that I've done up in the kingdom. So he's definitely somebody I wanted to help join me. And just because there's the 5 people here, to be clear, they were not the only crew. Charles the cat, he helps. But other people that helped was, of course, Phil. Rob was another boat pilot that was with my father and Jimmy on the kayak. My mom, Jimmy's spouse, Margie, my cousin, was there, probably wrangling my mother, keeping her calm for 25 hours.
Everybody needs shore support. That's true.
As was Jimmy's son Wolfgang. He's in some of the pictures at the start and the finish. The Rivards were there to see me at the start, in the middle, and at the end. Peter and I think Pam were there too to help me. I think Pam gave me the check my blood pressure when I was done, and Peter met me in the middle of the night in Canada.
Peter's great.
A list could go on with people, my training partners that I swim with, and I mean it's lots of people that were here to support me, not just these 5. But anyway,
Right. Yeah. But they're here for the retelling, and you can tell me more about the other people as they suffered.
They suffered for 25 hours with me, probably more than I did.
Yeah. So what was it? What was it like? What was it like getting going? Tell me how the kind of the start. Well, actually, there's a lot more preparation and things that go into it. Like I said, this is an experiment, so we're just gonna have to just kind of lay it all out on the table. How do you prepare for a 50-mile swim? I mean, we'll skip the swimming part because there's a whole training component, but how do you wrangle a crew, get a boat? How do you make all that come together?
Well, I admit I'm very lazy, and part of this process, at least for me, was Phil White does all the various swims in Vermont, and has for many years, and kind of has at least a skeleton of a framework in place for managing all this stuff. So, honestly, I paid him money to do it.
There's something to be said for that, and it's good to distinguish. So I appreciate that. Yeah, so you can give him money, and he's like, okay.
and that smoothed a lot of things. There was a little bit of there's always a little bit of friction. Phil was was battling some illness at the time of my swim, very suddenly, in fact. You know, Mary and I and my father had all arrived in Vermont about 2 weeks before. We did all of Kingdom Week that week, and for me it was kind of an acclimation and just kind of final training and just getting comfortable. You know, Christopher popped in for a swim or two there. Jimmy did too. My dad paddled most of it for me that week. So it was, you know, for all of us, it was kind of a warm up getting, you know, we'd been to Vermont a lot before, so we knew the area. But anyway, we had a 3-day window, and the first day didn't happen because just, you know, it was going to be a little too windy, which can always be a little too windy on that lake. But the morning we had decided to go, we got an email from Phil at like 5 in the morning that it's like, I can't be there today. So we've got 3 options. Option 1 is you guys go without me. Option 2, we wait a day or more. Or option 3 was we schedule it in September. And, you know, we'd already taken, a lot of us had taken 2 weeks off to do this. And it was like, no, we're just going to go.
We love you, Phil, but we're going.
You know, I mean, it was a bummer that Phil wasn't able to be there for it.
Yeah.
But, you know, he has seen me swim before. So I'm signed up for already more of his stuff. So he'll get to see me swim again. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're there for a couple weeks hanging out. You get the email. It says not, you got to go without me. Then what happens?
You know, we kind of, you know, like I said, we'd had 2 weeks to kind of prepare. We'd largely mapped out most of the things we needed to do. So my job was to just kind of stay horizontal. Christopher went and gassed up the boat. You know, eventually, you know, everybody kind of departed to go kind of start prepping the boat. Finally, Mary and I came over and, you know, just kind of do the critical things, the covering every inch of my exposed skin with, you know, diaper cream.
Right.
You know, and then kind of hurry up and wait. You know, we had the luxury of it was, we were ready to go at about 10:50 in the morning, and we just said, well, let's just wait 10 minutes and start 11:00. We'll make it easier to kind of record everything else from there on.
Mm-hmm.
That's a recommendation for everybody. Start top of the hour if you can.
Top of the hour, just for timing.
It doesn't hurt.
One thing I wanted to add too is when Stephen says boat, we're actually talking about 2 boats.
Yeah.
Actually making sure that we had 2 pontoons. So there were actually 3 of us on one and 3 of us on another. And we sort of had a kayak shifting pontoon and more of a sort of observation and feeding pontoon, but we communicated a lot. And over the course of that 25 hours, we're doing a lot of kind of handoffs of certain responsibility, and also just making sure we were both functioning. And I think it's really important to mention as something that's, I think, absolutely vital when you go into something this long. I mean, and even quite a bit shorter, 2 boats is a necessity. It wasn't an option. And there were multiple times where it became very, very critical that second boat was there, whether it was us having an issue or them having an issue. You know, the other person in the other boat could immediately come in. Additionally, having 2 kayaks was great. You know, in another world, we could have probably even had more, and given those guys a bit more of a break, because what they did was absolutely Herculean as well, just being just the 2 sole kayakers on this entire journey. But yeah, you know, all of that sort of gassing up and fueling and getting all the things on the boats was a plural, and we're so grateful that you know, we were actually able to wrangle two pontoons for this.
Were you planning to be piloting all along, Christopher?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. At least one of them. I have a lot of piloting, or at least boat experience, between sailing and power boating. So that's sort of just having grown up on the coast in Rhode Island. I've just got a lot of that. But it was also nice that we had Rob, who's not here today, because he has also done a lot of piloting on Mempremagog and had a real sense of, some of the things to look out for and where to go. And so he actually ended up leading for a significant amount of it. We were sort of in a follow position and they were ahead, because he was sort of leading, not just with experience, but, just an eye on what was coming.
Right. Yeah. Phil always makes it like, I feel like he kind of minimizes like, well, yeah, you go that way, but you're like, you kind of want to know just a little bit, like, but do I go too far? It's Rob's experience, I'm sure was critical in having him.
Very, very useful.
Yeah. So what happens then? We get underway. Well, there's all this prep work. What about like feed preparation and stuff like that? Is that what Mary and Jamie Ann were doing? Like over here mixing feeds? Tell us about it, you ladies. They're both like, no. Come on.
I'll let Mary go first.
So anyone that's been to Newport, Vermont, it is cold there all year long. Even in the summer, somehow in the middle of the night, it's like 40 degrees. And so, in terms of feeding, it wasn't just a matter of throwing stuff on the kayak and letting him have whatever he wants, because, sometimes he wants a hot feed or something like that. But, we were trying not to mix stuff too far in advance because then it would get cold. And especially doing a swim of that duration, most people are not going to just take a normal standard feed for 25 hours. They're going to want treats, whether or solid food or gels or something salty instead of something sweet. So that's why you kind of need a crew instead of just a kayaker, because when he mentioned his kayakers were just a kayak, that's what he meant. Normally kayakers are really in charge of feeds. But, when you have a crew, use them. Just let the kayakers kayak.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a fine balance there. How much do you mix in advance or like mix strong and then like add hot water? So you guys are heating water and stuff on the boat all night long?
Jamie Ann and Christopher were.
Yeah.
We had brought some hot water and we had brought some warm water, but again, it was really cold on the boat in the middle of the night. If you see some of the pictures, we are bundled up like it's winter on the boat.
This was August, right? August 22nd, is that right? Started?
And they had provided us, one of the things that was great about Rob and Phil is that they actually had provided us with some propane heater thing. Nice. Neither of us had ever used. So that was fun, trying to figure out how not to explode ourselves.
Right.
We figured it out.
But it was absolutely critical because we really ran out of hot water and hot things.
That's what I was going to say, is that none of the containers that we had were really sufficient to keep the water hot enough for 25 hours in the colder night, dark conditions. That's something for people to think about when they're swimming overnight or swimming for a very long time.
Right. Yeah, I've experienced that too. I think when I did Mempremagog, I was like towards the end, and I only did a single, but like it had this hydro flask, and I thought for sure 36 ounce hydro flask is going to keep it, warm for whatever, it's only 12, 14 hours. But you're opening it and closing it and opening it and closing it. So every time there's cold, getting in. So like there just isn't anything that can keep stuff warm for that long.
Well, so, you're also on a moving boat, so things are getting spilled.
Yeah. So what were conditions like? How was that? So you leave at 11 on the dot as a recommendation, at least get on something on the hour. And then what was it like?
Yeah. So to follow up before I start that, to follow up on Mary's thing, I did a long swim last summer too, and I had like a 1 gallon thing of water that was boiling, and it was lukewarm by the end of the night. Like like propane heater is something I'm going to have to invest in for the next time I do something stupid like this. Anyway, so we started at 11. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was, 60, 70 degrees. Water was similar temperature. It's always a little breezy there. My dad was the first kayaker, and we started off, and we just kind of left from Prouty Beach, and I think, or by the east side, and we just started heading out, and things were fine for a couple hours. I felt like I was flying, and then and suddenly about 2.5 hours in, Dad's going the other way. The wind had picked up.
Oh. What kind of kayak are you in, Steve?
I have a pretty substantial like fishing kayak. I forget exactly what it's called, but so it's very stable. That's important for me. I went to Scar a few times and have experienced really lousy weather, and knew that was important. That's something I would say you got to plan for the worst weather, because you're more likely going to get some, and you can't hope that you have good weather, because we hit that wind, I think about 90 minutes into it, and I was kayaking as hard as I could, and I was slowing him down. I mean, I just couldn't go into this wind, and we eventually just pulled me back to the pontoon, and Steve sighted off of the pontoon for about an hour, I think, and then eventually it calmed down a little bit, and then Jimmy was able to get in the water, and then we were able to maintain a 3-hour on and off shift from that point on. But that when that hit, that reminded me of some bad memories on Lake Apache. So it was kind of tricky there for a little bit.
Yeah. So was that a big shift for you, Stephen? So all of a sudden your kayaker's going backwards, and then you're like, what's going on? Of course.
I mean, I tried not to worry about it and let the crew do their job, and they really did a great job. Honestly, once it was decided, like, okay, we're putting them on the boat, we had 2 boats. So Christopher, Mary, and Jamie Ann, they all just stayed by my side, and then Rob and Jimmy helped Dad onto his boat, and then we just swam for an hour. I mean, it was fine. I mean, I've swam in all sorts of conditions. I do a lot of training without any, kayakers of any sort. So, I'm used to swimming open water kind of by yourself. So it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it's.
You didn't have that moment of like, wait, but.
Honestly, it was better got him on the boat, because it was like my dad said, it was like, okay, I'm waiting a minute while he catches back up, and then I swim for a minute, and then it's repeat. That's not a way to go. And it's I knew they'd be back in. Sometimes the wind blows.
Yeah.
It's a really good time to talk about that cone of vision.
Oh yeah. All right. Tell me about the cone of vision.
Say that.
All right, let's hear from
Jamie.
Jamie.
knows all about it. I think Jamie can talk a little bit.
Well, I think it's Stephen's term.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's Stephen's thing, and he told us all about it before we even got on the water.
Not just told us about it. Like, this is the number one. Like, the cone of vision is everything, and I think it's just I think it's also important to know, like, when you talk to your crew, and is what are some of the most vital things, because it might not be that. Some people actually love to swim like out ahead of the boats, or they like to be somewhere else. Like, I don't even want to see you. You're gonna mess me up or whatever. So everybody has this preference, but this was very important. And to basically be in Stephen's cone of vision as he breathed and as he was seeing us. So when a kayaker's suddenly not available, now the pontoon boat's taking that role. So it was just. We were sort of having fun with it, because you were so emphatic about it, Stephen, about like, you must be there or I will get very upset.
It's so important though to know, I mean, what you guys are talking about though is knowing your preferences, and what we kind of glossed over is, I bet there was some kind of crew meeting. So tell us, maybe we'll backtrack just a minute. So tell us, Stephen, what it was like. You get your crew, everyone's there, and you don't just like, start swimming. Obviously, you've got to talk about preferences and things like that. What was that like?
I mean, Mary might disagree with me, but I don't think I'm very picky. Christopher might disagree with me. Jamie Ann might disagree with me. Jimmy and my dad might also disagree with me. I don't personally think I'm very picky, but I've been told that sometimes I'm more picky than I think I am. But from a crew meeting, were mistakes made? Yes. Like, one piece of advice I'd give anybody for any crew, especially something that's crazy long, is tell them to dress like it's winter, even when it's 70 degrees out. I was probably the warmest person for most of the swim, and I was cold for 10 hours. But they get cold. It gets 40 degrees. It gets dark. It gets windy. As for the rest of it, I kind of intended to switch over to warm feeds at one point. And I switched over pretty early, because at this point, I'm just become more cautious and just like, might as well not get any colder than I already am.
Jump the gun. Yeah.
But you know, from a crewing perspective, it's like, okay, here's what I want to eat: bananas, cookies, some pretzels. Of course, we had probably twice as much food as any one person could eat. And then a lot of Carbo Pro with various flavors. Cream cheese brownies are a favorite of mine. But that's like that was my snack at the middle, and we'll talk about that later. But that turned into a little bit of a debacle, which was pretty funny.
This is from the not picky guy. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's a comedy of errors. But you know, I just, you know, the swimmer's job is to swim, and the crew's job is to take care of me, and it's a challenge because I'm not necessarily a person that just wants everybody to dote over me. So it's kind of a weird situation, like in the morning, where I'm like, my job is to not do anything. My job is to rest. You know, and we were lucky we could start in the morning instead of, you know, some people start their swims at 9 at night. Like, I didn't want to be awake for 36 hours. You know, just being awake for 24 was a little bit scary. You know, but the cone of vision, to go back to that, you know, it's just, I on a lot of swims, you know, with my dad, he's battled a lot of different conditions with me in the kayak, and sometimes he's way ahead of me or way behind me. And you know, when you're swimming for 3 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, okay, you can put up with that. But when you know you're gonna be looking at 24 hours of swimming, you want I don't want to keep looking up. It hurts your back, it hurts your neck. You know, it's just wasting energy. So the goal was to like, and it goes against my instinct. I like to sight. I like to see what's ahead of me. So I had to really control myself to just look at where the kayak was and just trust that they were taking me where I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for the most part. There was a point in the middle of the night where we had turned around. I don't know, we were probably 16, 17 hours in, and I just look up and I yell to Mary and Chris and Jamie Ann, and I say, "Why are we on this side of the lake?"
This is after the turn, and you're on your way back. Okay.
It's dark, and I'm like, "Why are we here?"
Okay.
They had a good reason. I'll let them.
Yeah. So we were going up the east side on the way up, and primarily a decision from a wind standpoint. I mean, one of the things that happens is obviously the way the winds come, and sometimes it's a headwind, sometimes you get a nice block from the shore. So you're always sort of looking to avoid, you know, the wind challenges there. And it just seemed after we sort of turned around, there was also some pretty weirdly heavy boat traffic at that hour of the night in Magog, which was very interesting. Like, there were some other boats, you know, it's pitch black. We really didn't have a lot of good light, you know, ambient light from the sky. There was some sort of dinner cruise thing happening. so there's like a very large dinner cruise ship coming around. We're like, this isn't good. So, you know, fortunately, again, Rob was helpful, and, you know, we were all just making sure that he knew their sort of schedule and where they might be, and everything was safe. But then when we kind of came out of that, the wind and other things were starting to pick up again a little bit. It just seemed like it made more sense to be on the other side. But we never really kind of communicated that. But we did start, it's a finger lake. So it's, you know, you're talking about many hundreds of yards. So it was like, well, whichever side really makes any difference. Right. Did we add more time and distance to Stephen's swim? Probably, by doing that. But my hope is that we also dodged some additional wind that was starting to happen, that would ultimately have made it more challenging to do that return. It's a totally different, it's actually like 4 or 5 different swims depending on how those conditions go. And you're just trying as crew manage that based on whatever's kind of hitting you in the moment.
Right.
Try to make it as easy for them as possible. But yeah, we definitely were, if you look at the sort of trajectory, we came down on the west side. And then basically as we hit the border, kind of slowly created a diagonal to get back to that sweet spot of, you know, really targeting Newport again.
Well, yeah, and it gets narrow right there. And I guess that maybe the other thing to point out too is this lake had only been doubled once before, or no, there was one other or 2 other attempts. There was a couple other attempts maybe that weren't finished. But and was Rob piloting those other ones? You know, like, so you guys are basically, you're making it up as you go, I guess is my point.
Yeah, so I don't know much history of the attempts that did not finish, but I actually had the opportunity to spend a weekend with Sarah Thomas that summer, and we trained together, and she is the only other person that has done the double and completed it. And she did it back in the Stone Age of marathon swimming. You know, these guys may have been cold on the boat, but they were in a 5-star hotel compared to what Sarah's crew had to deal with. It was, I know it was her husband and someone else, I'm forgetting, blanking on.
Bill Ship.
Bill. They were in a little tiny aluminum boat for 30 hours. And, the weather that they had, they didn't have a window. They just went when Phil told them to go. And Sarah can swim about my speed, so she could have easily done this swim in 25 hours if she'd had good weather. So that just tells you how awful her conditions were that day. That she was out there for those 5 extra hours. And I think she did that in like 2013 or something. So it was a ways back when she did that. And yeah, it was just the two of them, and they may have had a kayak. I don't remember that detail, but it was.
I can't remember either. Yeah.
It was a lonely, cold experience for those two on the boat.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing though, from a swimmer perspective, though, to kind of to trust your crew to make it up as they go. Like that. Just so, how do you? I don't know. Obviously, you had a moment where you're like, "Hey, why are we over here?" How did that go?
I mean, it was fine. Mary pretty much told me to shut up and swim.
You're like, oh yeah, that's right. My job's just to swim. Okay.
Shut up and swim, and like I think it impressed her more than anything that I was aware that I was in a different spot.
Yeah, I was pretty incredulous. The look on my face, if there was video, was like pretty incredulous. It's like pitch dark. We had just dodged this cruise ship or dinner, whatever, booze cruise. And he's like swimming up to the boat, like, why are we over here? I'm like, I can't even see my hand in front of my face. How does he know where we are on this lake enough to question it? It was hilarious to me, but impressive nonetheless. I mean, I could be swimming in perfect sunlight. I don't know where the hell I am.
Yeah. It's an interesting skill set. But what about lighting for the boat? Is that something you guys had when you started, or did you like put that on at some point in the middle, or how'd that go? So the swimmer could see the boat? Did you have any lights or the kayaks or anything?
And I think that was a learning. One of the things I'm just going to repeat. One of the best parts about this entire crew was that everybody had experience crewing before, and so we all sort of bringing our like, oh, let's not screw this up. And one thing I've done as a mistake in the past is kind of not put lights on the boats before, especially when you start in the day. You're sort of not thinking about it, and so there was definitely like we were ready to light things up when as it got dark, and there wasn't this notion of having to like assemble a whole lot of lighting. I think at that time, so I feel like we were quite well lit. We were also, of course, close to each other. We've been on Mempremagog swims. I've crewed other ones too, where it gets very spread out. The first person's 2 hours ahead, and Phil's way up there, and it's like you're trying to follow spotlights and things like that. So we did have a lot of LED and the flashlights and of course glow sticks and other things, I think, on the kayaks. So
and GPS.
And GPS, yes. I was using Navionics GPS on my phone, which was fantastic. Also, again, the luxury of these pontoon boats. We had power, USB. We could play music. It was.
You guys were just having a party.
It was really. Actually, as the night fell, I actually took the lead because I had Navionics. And so now, like Rob, certainly we were in touch, but he's like, look, if you've got GPS, it might make more sense for you to be out front. So I could actually see where we were going. Because as Mary said, it was very, very dark. And really, especially as you head away from Magog, at least when you have Magog in front of you, that's a light source. When you turn around, there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's so dark, and there's really no even landmarks. I mean, at one point, I think we were like 25 yards from the shore, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're really close.
Wow.
to the edge. We just really kind of didn't notice that until it was.
I want to say that on our way back, we turned around. That's when I got back in the water, and the winds hit again, just like it had at the beginning. And so I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but I was just about at the end of it again. And then it calmed down. But that's probably why they were seeking cover, because the winds had picked up again right around probably 11 o'clock, something like that, in the evening.
Mm-hmm. Right after. What was it? What time did you land before turning, Stephen? It was like 10.
Yeah, it was. I think it was just under 12 hours was when I hit the shore. Yeah, which there was a funny story there. So I had one of my treats that I kind of like on a swim like this, but not every feed, is I like pear juice, and I like the cream cheese brownie that I mentioned earlier. So I had said to the crew, and this again comes to like my fault. I didn't instruct the crew properly. I said I would like this at the turnaround. So they gave a cream cheese brownie and a thing of pear juice to my father to go give me. And it's 11 o'clock at night. It's 40 degrees out. The water's, I don't know, 70, 69 degrees. It's not cold, but it's not hot water. Anyway, I land on the shore. Peter's there with the flashlight. He waves me in. There's like a lighthouse or something. You kind of come in really fast. I had to like climb over a buoy line. I get on shore. I stand up. I say hi to Peter. I'm about ready to turn around and go back in the water. So my dad comes roaring up, lands on the beach. Jimmy comes roaring up, lands on the beach. They're now both illegally in Canada. On the shore. Dad's handing me the brownie and the pear juice. I'm like trying to hand him a rock. I just want to get back in the water. It's cold. I should have said I would like pear juice and a brownie at my next feed.
They're trying to get it to you at the turn, right?
I did not need celebration on shore. So I spent an extra 90 seconds on shore, which was fine. You're allowed 10 minutes. I was only there about 3. But I could have been in 90 seconds. Anyway, so it was just funny that like they came ashore. They didn't need to come ashore. It was fine. But, it's just, it was dark. It was 12 hours in. We were all a little confused and tired and we still have to go back. I mean,
yeah.
But, that was one thing about this swim was, mentally, I never treated Magog as anything more than never going to be anything more than stop for a minute and get back in and go. There's no time to think, I can just stop here.
Right.
You can't have that in your head. I mean, you can, but that's
well, it's a recipe for disaster, kind of. I think by setting yourself up, be like, oh, if you give it yourself the option, right? So if you don't give yourself the option, you're heading back. It's time to go.
I think it's important too to pick up on that fact that this is an international swim, and no matter how you do it, that complicates things. It complicates your access to help. It complicates where you feel like you can land legally. It almost seems unimaginable now because our border's been closed for so long, and it's just this idea of sort of being cavalier about crossing it. It's a different time. But I think as people look at the Mempremagog swims, singles or doubles, it definitely is it adds to a level of complexity when you're crossing an international border, just in terms of some of those accesses. And even though we're in a Finger Lake, it still feels like we can't touch the shore because that's the no-no.
Right.
We all had our passports with us, and we were okay, but it was still that's another thing Phil makes sure is all handled. But you still need to be aware that you're in a different country.
Yeah,
all
for sure. Right. All of a sudden it just happens. I haven't heard from Jimmy at all. Did you guys share a kayak, Steve and Jimmy, or were you just using one?
We had 2 kayaks, and the kayak that I was using was an older kayak that is kind of heavy and it's pretty stable, but was wider. I quite frankly have a hard time getting it on and off my my car because it's so heavy. But I guess my overall impression was that there was sort of large chunks of the kayaking that are just jumbles of hazy memories, because it was difficult, the 3 hours on and 3 hours off. I think in an ideal world, we really needed 3 kayakers to give us a break, but we made it through. And the impressions I had was just of it being really surreal, especially at night, with me kayaking and Steve next to me, outfitted with a bunch of glow sticks, and just kayaking at the night in the night like that was really weird. Um, and One of my most vivid memories was just of Steve turning to me and saying the next feed he would like to have chicken broth. And so I communicated that to the boats, and they got chicken broth for him. But I remember being really tired, and the coldness was a huge factor as well, because as the kayakers, we're getting wet. And in the middle of the night when it's like 40 degrees, you can't get dry either. So
Right.
we were just damp for hours at a time in that cold weather. So definitely dress as if it were winter, but have waterproof clothing.
Everything. Yeah, for sure.
And then towards dawn was very surreal as well, with watching the sunrise and being on the lake. And then at some point, I can't remember when in the morning, but it was early-ish. We saw some kayaks in the distance, and it was the Rivards coming out to meet us.
Nice.
And that was just, I remember seeing them and just feeling somehow that kind of meant that we're there, we're gonna make it.
Right.
We're almost at the finish line. Just seeing that welcome party come out was wonderful. So thanks for coming out.
Yeah, that's there are some magical times in the water. So did you experience the same kind of, was it cloudy that night so that you had like no, or did you get to see like stars and stuff? Or
You could see the stars, I think.
I
don't
Yeah,
think
it was
the moon
it was
phase
clear.
okay,
It
it was
was-
clear.
It was
just
clear. I think it was almost like a full moon.
was it?
I remember it being really dark.
Well, when you, like you said, when you get that light, when you're going towards Magog and then the turning away, I can only imagine how black that must have been.
I do remember.
I was going to say that once we got past noon or midnight or so, in the middle of the night, it actually cleared, and it was like a very large moon, and there was some moonlight on the water. And I distinctly remember, I don't know if anybody else saw it, but there was this incredible shooting star right directly in front of us as we were heading back to Vermont that just came across the sky. I was looking right at it, and it was clear enough to see it. That was really exceptional to see that.
I missed that one.
Yeah, the swimmers, we miss out on everything. What was the hardest part of the night day? What was the hardest part for you, Stephen? Like getting through?
I was lucky. My body didn't fail me for most of the time. I got cold about 14 hours in. It wasn't like a problematic cold. It was more of an annoyed cold. I'm sure a lot of us that have swam really long and cooler swims have felt this kind of cold where it's like, yeah, I can deal with this, but I don't like it.
Right. And at this point, you had just turned. You're only 2 hours in on the return, right? And you're cold.
Some of the best parts were like, I really liked swimming in the dark. I hadn't done a lot of experience, but it didn't bother me at all. The sunrise was pretty great, but probably one of the most challenging points was right around the U.S.-Canada border. It'd been a long time by then, and it's about, I think, 5 miles left when we get to the United States. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we've been swimming 45 miles, and first, I wouldn't quite call it a hallucination, but I could swear I saw this customs boat that was like just floating alongside the main pontoon boat, and I'm like, oh, they're gonna pull him over. What's going on? I don't know. 30 minutes of that. Finally, I realized it's the motor on the boat that I'd hallucinated into a second boat. Anyway, but Jamie Ann was playing, I think, Born in the USA when I crossed into the US. But so the shore does some funny stuff around there. There's an island also that we've swam around for some other stuff. And so before we cross in the United States, I start seeing the land and I'm thinking, oh, that's the island. And I yell, I was like, that's the island, right? And somebody on the boat, I forget who, was like, no, it's not. It's the one up ahead. And I'm just like, oh. So instead of 5 miles to go, it's 7 miles to go, and it's like that's tough at 43 miles when you think it's 45.
Right. Yeah.
That was probably one of the tougher parts. But then the Rivards came and had a little party on the lake and kept going.
They were kayaking with you or swimming?
Oh no, they all three of them, Margaret, Vera, and Darcy, they were on their little red kayaks and they came out and just paddled with the group for 15 minutes, and then they headed back in to meet us at the finish.
That's fun.
There actually wasn't any paired swimming on this. So yeah, Stephen was solo the entire time. The only person who ended up getting in the water at all was me. But that's
Oh really? Do tell.
I have to tell that story. We had two sort of emergencies. One was one of the things, as many of you know who've been on these swims before, even a pontoon boat, which is incredibly slow, still doesn't have necessarily an idle speed that works really well, and so you're kind of constantly kind of throttle stop. So Phil had gotten us these parachutes to sort of throw off the back and help create drag, which is fantastic, until you sort of stop at some point and you don't realize that one of them gets completely bound up in the motor. So we were actually just, doing our thing, and all of a sudden the boat just stops, the motor stops, and it's just panic, of course, because we're very close to the shore and we're kind of now drifting into a cliffside, and it's like, oh, this is horrible. This is about to end really fast. So I went to the back trying to figure out what was going on, and I could see what had happened. I said, oh, all right. So we cut all the power. I immediately got out of everything I was wearing and jumped in the water and untangled it, put it back together, and probably within 90 seconons we were on our way.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's fast.
Yeah, it was just this sort of immediate need to react gut sense of like there's no time. But again, another great opportunity. Rob completely. We called ahead. We said something's wrong with the boat. You need to take over. Main role. He was pretty far ahead, so he circled back immediately, and it was almost like nothing had happened.
I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And the other moment was actually as the sun was rising, almost at that same spot. I think that spot is sort of cursed for us. Rob had a little dozing moment.
Oh no! Oh no!
And so again, I mean, we really were down at least one crew member without Phil. So everybody was, I piloted essentially for 25 hours. So did Rob, and I think Rob took a little nap. And so at some point, I'm watching their boat, and it's turning and it's turning, and it's going straight to shore. And I said, this doesn't really make sense. What are we doing? And so we called ahead a couple of times, and then it immediately corrected itself. It's like, oh, we're fine. And later he sort of confessed that he had taken just a little bit of a snooze.
Understandably. Yeah.
Probably just sitting there trying to drive after, at that point, 18 hours. And I don't know how long he had been up. So yeah, another reason for heavy communication and two boats.
Two boats or four pilots. Do you think
were you
a kind of?
I think it was just Stephen was out there on his own the whole time.
Swimming wise, yeah. What about though for you? Would you have preferred to have a relief from piloting, Christopher?
I don't know. I mean, I always knew that. Jamie Ann or Mary could have taken over had we needed to do that. In fact, none of us slept. None of us took breaks, and it was just this sort of energy. We definitely had tired moments, but I think, there was just the energy and the sort of static of the event. I think as crew, and this has happened on other things I've crewed at this distance. It's just you don't want to go down for any time. You're like, you're so into it with the swimmer, and you're also impressed with what they're doing. You're like, well,
he's not sleeping. Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to sleep. Like, I've got this luxurious platform. Why would I do that? So yeah, I think it's always a good. I think the backup kayakers and having it had an additional kayaker, because they were doing the real strenuous work. I think that would have been where we would have added a third person or another person to the crew. But
Jimmy or Steve,
have done it with the 6 that we had was I think it was perfect because of the experience level. Everybody knew how to react, how to respond, and how to kind of hand off. And also, to be honest, I think about where you were at. Like, I'm super excited, or super tired. I just need 15 minutes to just clear my head. So I think people were just very very good about the communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important.
Very.
To say the least. Steve and Jimmy, were you guys able to take little cat naps when you traded off at all? Or did you stay up the whole time too?
I definitely. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jimmy. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, so I definitely did take a few cat naps. It is really strenuous kayaking. At the same time, I'm not the swimmer, so it's really impressive that Steve was able to do the 25 hours. But being alert for 3 hours on kayaking is pretty difficult. So I did take a few naps here and there.
It's a good choice.
Yeah, and probably around the same time that Rob was also taking a nap.
On the running pontoon.
We were on the same boat. I think at most of the time it was just me and Rob, but I think Steve, you came on the boat for a little bit, right?
That one time when the wind was really high at the beginning, but otherwise it's just one of us was on the boat, one was kayaking. I wasn't on the boat when Rob had his incident, but I know that, I don't think I went to sleep. I didn't intend to. It's not impossible that I did, but I kept awake. I was, it's like Jimmy said, it was, I had worn neoprene thinking that would keep me warm. Well, it might keep me warm if I was kayaking, but wet neoprene in the middle of the night, it was making me cold. So it wasn't a very good choice. I should have had very good waterproof stuff on. It would have been a much smarter way and to not be so cold.
Yeah, that's a good one. Just and if you're getting in and then out, like you need like a switch in gear. All right. I haven't heard about any of the parties on the boat. Was there dance parties happening while? No, none of this. Mary's shaking her head. How did you guys stay awake?
Getting a little rowdy towards the end. I think once we hit the Canadian border, and it wasn't rowdy. It was just punchy. You become intoxicated on the sleep deprivation. And all the sugar.
So, yeah.
I have just I think the best memories I have are actually from that last 5 miles, because it was you're just drunk, It's just fun. And it's also that excitement building of like, oh my God, who's really going to finish this? Like, this is really happening. Not that any of us really had any doubts, but you never know what the conditions are going to be and what the world's going to throw at you. So when you really see that end nearing, it's electric. And it's one of the best parts about being crew, and why we always recommend people be crew, is just to feel that excitement with the swimmer. And they, together you're accomplishing this thing. So it's super fun. Yeah, we were playing a lot of music.
That's good.
I have to say that I got to say that from a kayaker's point of view, it looked like they were having way too much fun, and it was like a real drag out in the kayak, just slugging away, and they're over there partying. It looked like, So I know they didn't have anything to drink, but it sure looked like they had something to drink.
To be fair, we got a little nuts around 4 a.m. Like, that's the real witching hour before the sun comes up. Everybody was like, I think everyone was committed to staying awake just for the energy factor of like, when the swimmer stops, it's important for them to be able to see you. Like, that's all they're looking at for 25 hours is what's going on the boat. Mm-hmm. So like the energy on the boat needs to be thought about. And so around 4 or 5 a.m., I think everybody was getting really tired, but waiting for the sun to come up, it's super cold. Around the Canadian border, is what we would call the shack, and we continued to call the shack. Anyone that swam any of Phil's, I think the 10 mile, the Kingdom Swim and the Border Buster or anything like that, you go past this tiny little custom shack. And we were looking for that with like just desperation. And that's where Stephen started hallucinating about where he was, because we had actually seen the revert. I believe we saw the revards further back from that, right?
It's all right around that same time, I think.
Yeah. And I think, you know, once we kind of got back to the United States, it was like, you know, we knew he was tired, but, you know, we knew we were going to make it.
Yeah, that 4 a.m. hour, I think, is often a hard time. I guess I've heard a lot of swimmers say like that for them, like that 3-4 o'clock, like middle of the night, can be really, really hard when you start hallucinating and stuff.
Yeah, there had been I'd spent most of the summer kind of debating that, like, should I start at 6 in the morning? Should I start at 9 at night? You know, was Phil going to give me an option to pick my time, or was he going to tell us to go whenever he wanted to do it? You know, and I'm glad we were able to start at 11. I feel like the morning light's a real morale boost. You know, I'm maybe unusual among swimmers because I just count. Like, I was counting my feeds, I was counting minutes. You know, there's 1,440 minutes in a day, and I'm like, okay, I've done 3 feeds, that's 90 minutes. I've done 8 feeds, that's that's 4 hours, 240 minutes, and just kept going. It's like, okay, I hit 720 minutes. That means I got 720 to go to get to 24 hours, because I figured by 24 hours I'd at least be close.
Yeah.
You know, I had like mentally joked in my head, like, oh, what if I finish at 23:57? Do I go back out for 5 minutes to get a hour swim? I mean, what do I do here?
Right. To run through all those options.
Fortunately, the wind took care of that and put us well over 25. But you know, there were a couple other interesting things, like there's a lot of weeds towards the finish, and the pontoon boat couldn't really go there, and so Dad was finishing up the crewing, and the wind was such that I was like a half stroke away from the kayak, and I finally had to just be like, Dad, you need to get on the other side of me, because I can't take these waves rolling me into you for this last half an hour.
Yeah.
And then we worked it out, you know, and then you make that final turn, and then you pass the beach, and you still see the east side, and you're just like, doesn't ever seem that long in other times when you do it, but
Right.
at the end of a long swim like that, it is. But it was, you know, it was just, I mean, the end was just so much fun. Like, there was a point where Jamie Ann had the camera, and I was just making stupid faces at her for like 5 minutes, like, get a good picture of me with this stupid face. And
No, I think I had you on Facebook Live so Sarah could see you, and you were being so weird.
But no, it was, you know, the sun was up. It was breezy, but nice and beautiful. And, you know, every stroke was getting us closer to shore. And then, you know, there's those, like, if you're swimming a swim with a bridge and you can see the bridge for half of your swim, and it can kind of be demoralizing. You know, everything in Vermont's not quite as big. So, you know, when you start to actually see landmarks, once you at least can figure out that you're looking at what you think you are, you're like, oh, we're close. Oh, we're really close. And, you know, I remember at the end, you know, the water's this deep, and then it's this deep, and then it's this deep, and then it's this deep. And finally I'm like, I guess I should stand up. And it's standing up at that point is not as easy as you might think. You don't want to fall. You don't want to, you know, my friend Mark Spratt, he finished his Catalina, and they steered him into rocks, and he's got scars from that still, just climbing over these jagged rocks. It was more river pebbles I was climbing over, so it wasn't quite as brutal, but it's just like, in my moment of triumph, the last thing I want to do is face plant in the in the shallows.
Right.
But yeah, it's like you climb out, and we're yelling to Wolfgang, Jimmy's son, who's was about 9 or 10 then, and it was just like, don't touch him. Don't touch him. So it's like I climb out of the water and I raise my hands for the last time for the day, and I stopped the watch, and that was the swim.
That was the swim. Did you for me, whenever I finish I've never swam as long as you have, but I always have that, like, my body, it takes me a while to right myself. Like, I pretty much have to go back to horizontal. Like, I can't stand too long. Do you have any, like, nausea, or I don't know, your body just, like, not quite working like it's supposed to after finishing a big swim like that?
It definitely wasn't working right. I was lucky. I had zero nausea. I had the easiest swim you could have from a physical perspective. I mean, I had some sore shoulders, but there's no surprise there. But no nausea, no anything. But I got out, and it's like the blood pressure kind of goes a little bonkers, and then I just kind of slumped down and kind of kneeled. And there's some pretty good pictures of me. I think Margaret's sitting next to me with holding a bag of Ruffles potato chips open, and I'm just like shoving those. Wolfgang was really pumped because he'd gotten a bag of candy, and he brings it over, and I'm just shoving those in my mouth. We did that for a few minutes, and then I hadn't even really kind of had the after drop yet. Eventually, there's chaos at the end. Rob's like, we have to go to the customs place and get you checked in. So my dad and Rob and I all get in a car. I don't even know whose car it was, and we drive across Newport, get to this customs. There's nobody there. It's like an iPad, so we're like pounding on the iPad trying to get it to work. And I'm just getting cold now, and finally Pam found us, and she checked my vitals and cleared me, and then eventually somehow Phil magically from the internet checked me back into America. And Dad and Jimmy still aren't, so they're fugitives. That was probably one of the more disappointing things about the whole swim was, there's this chaos of like, oh, we have to get Steve checked back into the country and do this. And it's like, instead of getting to hang out with everybody at the shore for a little bit more time, it kind of whisked me away. And I really wish that I'd had a little more opportunity to kind of just have time to spend with everybody at the end, because they're all so excited. It was such fun, and but then later I got back, and I'm taking a nap, and just the blood was like pooling in my arms or something, and then just like my whole arms were falling asleep even though they weren't doing anything, and then just kind of like sitting on my chest like a vampire. And it was a rough couple hours after you kind of your body's just kind of getting back to normal.
Yeah. Yep. Was there anything that you forgot to bring on the boat? Anybody?
Jackets, I think, for them.
It's a good one.
I felt okay on temperature, but
I think we were smart to bring cleaning supplies, because 25 hours on that, and the pontoon boat did not arrive to us in a very clean state. So cleaning supplies was a great clutch move that someone remembered to bring.
But no one forgot anything other than jackets and being a little
we
cold.
we really trashed that boat. Like, well, because you're just every 30 minutes is like, okay, it's go time, more feeds. And you're just like, where's that thing? And you have all these bags because you have your own equipment and the swimmer's equipment. And so by the end, it's always funny to me to see what boats look like at the end of a swim. I mean, it's like a tornado hit. And I think it's just kind of a necessity. Like, there's just no way to do it cleanly, like, because there's always unexpected things. So you're just pulling things apart and scattering towels and food bags and everything. And so it's just like, you sort of look at the wreckage of it, and like, oh my God, are we really this sloppy? Like, no, it's a war out there. Like, you've got all this action.
Plus, a big chunk of it's at night in the dark. So
it actually, Mary, Jamie, and at least on our boat, like, you guys really started to pick it all up at the end, because I think you sort of realized, like, okay, now we're at a point where we're having trouble finding things that are really important, like, because it's buried underneath like all this other stuff we threw over here. So it wasn't as bad I'm making it out to be, but it's still like you do end up in this moment where you're just grabbing at things because you need to in the moment.
Yeah. And I heard, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we've all done this before, you know, in some capacity of these distance swimming. So we were pretty good at just knowing what we kind of needed. I mean, like we kind of got lucky. We had the propane heater. Sounds like that I learned after the fact. Like, oh well, there was I burned my tongue at one point on swim.
Oh no.
You're having trouble.
I almost said something about that earlier. It got to the point where I had to like taste test every single time because Stephen would be like, Jesus Christ, Jamie Ann, are you trying to kill me? And like the water was not that hot. I just think Stephen's sensitivity got worse as the day went on.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you like the wrist thing? Like they like the baby put the bottle.
I should have done that.
Yeah, I mean, my tongue was, you know, my body had cooled off quite a bit over the night. Like I said earlier, I was cold I wasn't cold until the return. So, I mean, it was the middle of the night, probably 15 hours in was when I finally started to not be warm anymore. You know, again, it was never like a worried cold. It was just more like, okay, this is how it's going to be till we get to the shore. And yeah, the morning sun, certainly not the late August Vermont sun. It's not
that warm.
Not that warm.
Yeah, the light helps though.
I would say that over the last several years that Steve and I have done this, I put together a checklist, and every time we do one of these, more stuff goes on it, like the propane heater, I guess now.
Yeah.
So it was important to have it written down and go through it and make sure that you're not forgetting something that's important on something like this.
Yep. Did I hear you and Jimmy both say you needed probably a little bit more waterproof stuff as far as forgetting
different
things? Yeah.
A different kind of clothing so that we wouldn't have been wet, which made us really cold.
Yeah.
And heartier food, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a not to be underestimated is how much, like you guys are working hard the whole time, so having enough food for yourselves for sure.
You definitely can't just bring snacks for 25 hours or so. I mean, you really need some substantive food to eat.
Yeah, that's a good one too. What about, was there any point where you guys had to improvise? Like really improvise?
I think other than just those two sort of surprise moments, you know, on jumping in the water and fixing the boats and just making sure we were on track. I think there was in that improvisation of just, you know, and also even when Big Steve was sort of, you know, facing that wind a couple of times. I mean, I think those are just the moments you're improvising, but you're so prepared for it that it's natural. It's like, okay, we knew what we were going to do in this situation. We're enacting plan B and you just go for it. So yeah, there was nothing that really fell so far apart that we were like, okay, we're in new territory. You know, I just again feel really blessed that we had such good experience on the team, but also, you know, the part of that experience was all the experience of the people who'd done this before with all of the single crossings. And just Phil and what he's set up there. I mean, the radios were charged, you know, all sorts of stuff that just sort of was already in place that, you know, we could never take for granted. You know, that just made it that much more of a, I mean, it's what you pay for.
Right.
So
Totally.
that. But yeah, if we were to have kind of done this cobbled together from scratch without the help of Kingdom and then Phil, that would have been a very different story.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
I think that if I remember, we didn't really plan to do the kayaking the way we ended up doing it, but when Phil didn't show, and it became clear immediately that both kayaks just needed to work off of Rob's boat, because all my stuff was on Chris's boat, you know, because we had a different plan at the beginning, and so at some point we had to transfer stuff because we decided the best way to do it was to just keep doing the kayaks from the one boat and just leave Chris and everybody else alone to do their thing.
Yeah, that was a heavy improvisation, and like we said, we made that decision hours before we left. You know, it really was okay, are we going? Or are we not going? You know, because Phil really just could not make it that day and had hoped to, but yeah, it was just sudden complications. So
yeah, we had I had six active crew people for me on 2 boats for 25 hours, and I bet if you'd been an extra person on each boat, that probably still wouldn't have been enough. Like more hands is always better, and it can be hard for so many different reasons why you can't have that kind of crew on every swim, and that makes you gotta it's not really improvisation. It's just executing on the plan and making it work regardless, I guess. But yeah, I mean, these guys are all experienced. I mean, Mary's done countless marathon swims. Jamie Ann's done a bunch. Christopher as well. Jimmy's been kayaking for me up in Vermont since 2016, and my dad's been with me since 2014 kayaking. These guys all know what they're dealing with me, and that's that helped. They all knew what they were doing, and so I had the opportunity to crew for Jamie Ann at SCAR the year prior, and it was such a good learning that was my first chance to crew for somebody, and it was just such a good learning experience to kind of like see it from the other side, but also like it made me realize like, oh, I know what the crew person, as a crew person, I know what the swimmer wants because I've been there. And I think with all these people, Jimmy's been my kayaker, but he's been taking advantage of the opportunities at the Kingdom to swim there too. So he's becoming his own long distance swimmer in his own right. He refuses to admit it. Just gotta get my dad to start swimming, and then the whole group can do swims.
Yeah. There we go. We'll recruit them one by one. What about any big learnings that you take forward? Did you learn anything new?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I learned was better crew instructions, and it's still something that I struggle with today. It's just they don't want, when I'm swimming, they don't want me to have to make any decisions. It should all just happen for me. But I have to also, sometimes I forget that I need to give them the details so they can make those decisions for me. And sometimes they're having to guess, and that's tough on them because, they only are there to help me and look out for my best interest. And sometimes there can be a conflict there. And, in the case of me, again, I don't think I'm particularly fussy, but, there's just little things like I wish I had said, oh yeah, give me the pear juice at the feed. It's like in my head, that's what I wanted, but, and I try to work with like a 30-minute forward thing. Like, so when my feed hits and you kind of get in the flow state of swimming and the 30 minutes just kind of drop off like minutes at that point, I'll be like, next feed, I want chicken broth and potato chips and a cookie instead of whatever I'd had before. And I try to let them know that in advance, but sometimes they're like, well, we can get it to you now. Other thing I did that it was a mistake was I didn't take my ibuprofen until, I don't know, sometime after the turn, I think. Mm-hmm. They were like, you want some ibuprofen? I'm like, no, I'm fine. I was pretty sore. So the next big swim I did, I took it after like 6 hours because I'm learning. I try to learn from these.
Yeah. I bet we all learn. What about you, Mary? Did you learn anything?
I think everyone knows you pretty much have to expect the unexpected. Like, none of us saw the cruise ship coming. Phil's communication is pretty much, oh, there's no boats out there.
Right. Yeah.
And
except when there is. Right.
Phil's not taking people there at midnight, but yeah, I mean, you have to just expect that when you're crewing, things are going to go wrong, like the sea anchor getting caught in the engine. And, you have to just react like immediately. Like, I remember as soon as the engine cut out, I was just grabbing bags on the boat, just being prepared to like jump on the other boat if that's what we had to do. Because, I mean, to be fair, Chris did a remarkable job getting the boat up and running in like a minute or two, but we had no idea that was going to happen. You know, we didn't know what was wrong with the boat. We didn't know if we were going to be down to one boat and we were all jumping on another boat. So you just have to be able to react and not freeze, and just remember what's the focus. You know, when something goes wrong, what needs to happen and what could be pushed off until later. But I think, you know, the communication with the swimmer is obviously critical, because I know for me at the turn, like, I just expected him. I thought I was finally getting a 5-minute break. I thought, oh, he's going to be on the shore. I could do this. I could do that. And then like 90 seconds, I hear Peter on my like radio, like, he's in the water. I'm like, what? He's in the water. And I was just like, oh, okay, I guess we're not taking a break. But I mean, to be fair, it was very cold. I understand why he got back in the water as quick as he did. But, you know, I was under the assumption that he was going to take a break and he was going to have a brownie and we were going to have 5 minutes off. And you know, people think that, oh, well, you know, you're only working for like a couple minutes every 30 minutes, but it's really not the case. You're pretty much doing something on the boat the entire time. You know, and I mean, we had sufficient crew. It wasn't a lack of, you know, all hands on deck, because, you know, we definitely had enough people, but you're still pretty much busy the entire time you're on the boat. And, you know, you have to remember your energy surrounding the swimmer too. Is like when the boat cut out, like, don't panic on the boat. So he's swimming going like, what's going on up there? You know, you don't really want the swimmer to either, if stuff happens, you don't even want them to know about it. And you definitely don't want them to be upset or panicked about it if you can avoid it. And I feel like everyone did a really good job around that.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Jamie? Ann, anything that you learned or that you want to share? We're rounding out our time just in case you're curious. So.
I will say that as a female peeing off the back of a pontoon boat when it's 40 degrees outside, and you're inevitably going to get wet, you got to kind of plan around that. Luckily, Chris was great to work with me and Mary on that. And I don't think Rob or the kayakers saw anything, but that's something to think about. Luckily, me and Mary had packed like towels and basically overnight clothes. I felt like we stayed pretty warm. I think we even packed like hot hands and stuff like that. I do remember getting cold at one point, but it kept me awake. So I would say that was the biggest struggle for me and staying awake, but we got past that. I feel like everybody's attitude stayed really well. I had done one other 50-mile swim attempt at Lake Powell. So I had the experience of the long night, the crew communication. Stephen's a good communicator. He plans well. I would say he's a little OCD, which I appreciate. And so Stephen was great. I had no problem crewing for him.
Awesome. About you, Christopher, anything you learned or last things you want to share?
Yeah, honestly, just repeating everything that was just said. You know, all of that from Mary and Jamie. And I mean, I can't. It's hard to add anything to that. You know, other than just the you know, just being so well prepared with all the details. You know, I think to only have a list of one or two things you do differently is pretty remarkable when you end something like this.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I had done another 25-hour crew earlier than the year, and I think, you know, took some of that learning actually into this, just from and that boat energy actually was a big part of that, because we had definitely gotten sort of slow and sluggish, and, you know, part of your role is to keep that energy high. Not annoyingly high, obviously, but to a level that the swimmer isn't picking up on it, because they do, and we do as athletes. It's like, it's hard when you're tired and others are clearly with you on that journey. So being able to keep that elevated is really important.
What are your tips for how to pump it up when it starts to go down?
Sugar. Music, but also, I mean, I think letting people take breaks. You know, I think it's you know, having fresh people and fresh, you know, if you have that luxury, then yeah, definitely rest. But also, yeah, I think it's just, you know, it's just that preparation and going in and talking to the crew early on. And we didn't really have a discussion about it, but I think it just happened, which was nice. Again, from the experience of having been in that situation before, both in the water and out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. What about you, Jimmy? Anything that you learned or want to share about your experience?
I think just the extra kayaker,
Okay.
really key. But other than that, I think it all went pretty well, considering how big of an endeavor this whole thing was.
That's it? Nothing? Just went well? No learnings or anything? The extra kayaker, we got that. What about you, Steve?
He, from the beginning, I kind of assumed that I would just sight off of the pontoon, right? I didn't have to sight like I would in another race. But at the end, all of a sudden, Chris had to go right. He had to go west, I think it is, because it's too shallow. And I didn't know where I was anymore. And I really was, and of course it's 24 hours into it or something. So I'm really confused too. And so I should have known better. I should have had a better idea of the map, right, where I was, because I was totally confused. And I kept thinking, I thought I was getting blown way off course. I was getting frustrated. So I should have been paying more attention to a map. And then the last thing I wanted to make sure I put in was that maybe it's something that Steve didn't learn, but that I wrote it down right after we got in, and it was quote unquote, that was the dumbest thing I've ever done. Quote unquote from Steve.
That's a great segue. So Stephen, have you hit your limit? And what did you learn?
I've learned nothing, despite what my father just said. No, I did a 55K last summer, and in a lot of ways I was probably more miserable at that than I was at Memphrey. I ended up with reflux and the hiccups for 2 hours, and then I literally was like had hiccups for coming in bouts for days afterwards, and sore diaphragm. It was miserable. So no, I keep doing it, and I'll probably continue to do something stupid in the future. What, I haven't decided, but stupid it definitely.
Stupid's I'm still trying to, this is part of my mission with Marathon Swim Stories, is we are self-deprecating, but I don't think it's stupid. There's something more there. There's something more there. I'm gonna find it.
There is, but at the same time, the kind of swims that 25 hours is a long time, but like the kind of swims that like Sarah Thomas had done, or Caroline, who's on here, have done, that are even like ridiculously longer than that. I don't know if that's for me.
That's good to know what's for you.
There's like, I feel like I have a limit. Like I don't feel the need to be like, I don't need to have the longest swim ever. This is good for where I am. I'm still jumping in ice water, for winter swimming right now. And like I'm a professional at it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a little crazy. And
it can be crazy. It's okay to be crazy. I'm sure of that.
I picked a bunch of crazy people to work with me, because that's what you need. You need people that understand.
Yep.
Or at least if they don't understand, at least they'll support you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And
man.
Special thanks to my mother for not letting me do it, because I'm an adult, but accepting that I do this, because I know I drive her crazy.
That's good. That's good. My goodness, thank you all so much for being here today. This was really fun for me to hear the story. I still feel like there's some still secret something or another that you're not sharing, but we only have an hour and a half. So if it comes to you, you want to add it, let me know.
There is no secret. It's just, you got to put in the time to train. You got to put in the time to swim, and don't make your first swim be a 50 miler. It's not going to go well for you. I don't care who you are. But I think the fact that it went as well as it did was really a testament to my crew and their training and their experience. You know, they made it happen. You know, my job was to swim, their job was to take care of me, and they did an amazing job. And I couldn't have done it without them.
Absolutely. It's a team sport.
They made my job easy, so I appreciate it.
Awesome, you guys. Well, I'll let you all get back to your Sunday. Thank you so much. It was awesome to hear all about the double Memphrey in 2019. All right, you guys. We'll see you later. I'll
Thank you.
share details
Thanks.
once things are up. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Do you want to take Marathon Swim Stories with you? Subscribe on your favorite podcast provider. Want to connect with like-minded limit pushers? Join us for Marathon Swim Stories live on Tuesdays at 5:30 a.m. Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, 13:30 GMT. Thanks for watching.